Previously on Discograffiti with special guest Lou Barlow.
I just love getting high and recording, so I was working night shift at a nursing home, doing psychedelics, smoking weed.
like Keezy with Cuckoo's Nest. Were you thinking along those lines?
No, I don't know what I was thinking other than I just wanted to experience, and I did. I had an absolutely beautiful, I had a life-changing acid trip when I went to work on acid, and it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life.
Welcome to Discograffiti, the music podcast that delivers the objective truth about the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever existed. I'm your host, Dave Gebrow, and in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on Black Sabbath, along with very special guest, JIM FLORENTINE. So if you're tuning in for the first time, I'm going to come clean. I just quit my job a few weeks ago while putting the Pavement series together, which was a 6-episode series celebrating one of the 90s greatest bands, because I do it all, which requires stupid amounts of time. Everything from obtaining the guests, doing all the social media, all the recording and editing, you name it. And I love it. I'd have it no other way. The last 6 weeks of my career as a hearing instrument specialist was spent literally editing and promoting the Pavement series 8.5 hours a day, non-stop, until there was nothing to do but leave. So why am I telling you this? Well, because I'm doubling down on Discograffiti. My wife and 3-year-old son are doubling down on Discograffiti. We're selling our house and planning on living as frugally as possible on the East Coast, and all of that just to ensure that Discograffiti is the standard bearer for all that is awesome about music. So don't go anywhere when this episode's done. Subscribe. Coming up, we have 3 more fucking weeks of JIM FLORENTINE rating Black Sabbath, then 2 weeks of Randy Randall from No Age rating Jesus Lizard, Sergio Diaz from Os Mutantes rating his own early work, and on and on and on, way, way into the future. Here's what I'd love for you to do. Check out all the back episodes. Trust me, they're all as good as the one you're about to hear. Share the ones you dig with your friends, post them all on your various pages and accounts, and tag me on the posts. I promise to join in and make a comment. Also, join our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. We're on Instagram and Twitter too, in case you don't mess with the Zuck. Also, please rate the podcast 5 stars, along with a beautifully worded review, especially if you're listening to the show on good old Amazon Music, or of course Spotify. It'll help a lot. The link to our legendary playlist is in the show notes, and also on our website at discograffiti.com. And if you're like me, and enough is just never enough, then visit patreon.com/discograffiti and become one of our Patreon Soldiers of Sound. Our Patreon feed is the ultimate music deep dive. I post 3 shows a week. The main show on Sunday, then Discograffiti's The Private Press with Paul Major on Tuesdays, and a Thursday wildcard episode, which is either an interview with that week's guest or one of our other offshoot shows like Rock Cousteau, Queasy Listening, and Battle Royale. So hey, try it for a month. You've got nothing to lose. Okay, back to business. First things first, you need to know just how seriously I take this craziness. Discograffiti's heavily researched, and the music's always reassessed with fresh ears. We're not just covering albums. Nope, we do a searingly honest deep dive analysis of all EPs, singles, comp tracks, relevant solo work, and bootlegs. Every release is slapped with an objectively accurate star rating between 0 and 5, which allows us all to come face to face with the true shape of an artist's overall arc. Hold up! You bastards! I could not possibly be more psyched about our guest tonight. He's a stand-up comedian, actor, author, television personality, and unquestionably the greatest crank caller of all time, Jerry Lewis included. He is understandably well known for co-hosting That Metal Show on VH1 Classic, along with Don Jameson and Eddie Trunk, as well as for his legendary work on Crank Yankers, especially Special Ed and Bobby Fletcher. He hosts Metal Midgets on Sirius XM satellite radio and a podcast called Everybody's Awful Except You. He's released 6 albums of stand-up comedy, 2 comedy specials, 6 installments in the Terrorizing Telemarketers prank call compilation, and 3 installments of Meet the Creeps, a hidden camera show. His 2018 book, Everybody's Awful Except You, reached #1 on the Book Soup nonfiction chart. Like me, he's from Jersey via Brooklyn, which basically explains every last thing you need to know. However, unlike me, tonight's guest opened for Metallica at Orion Fest and played to a crowd of over 50,000. Quite odd for someone who never seriously pursued heavy metal as a career path due to a lack of virtuosity on any instrument whatsoever. Lads and ladies, way out yonder in Discograffiti'ville, will you please ooh and ah in sexualized awe while his Emmy gleams tantalizingly from his bedside table? Welcome him with open arms and guarded hearts, but just know in your soul the extent to which I've gone to procure literally the perfect guest for the occasion, next to the snarling, almighty, shit-encrusted demon of the underworld himself, Satan motherfucking Jim Florentine.
Wow, what an intro. Yeah, it was great.
I'm trying to go half bio, half intro.
That was great, man. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're the only guy to do this, in my mind.
Sabbath's just been my favorite band since probably, I don't know, probably 14 years old. I realized it's my favorite band. And ever since then, never wavered. No one's ever hit that #1 spot. Out of all the other bands, metal bands and stuff, it's still always been Sabbath. There still always will be.
What was the moment? I mean, was there one moment where somebody played it for you, or did you discover them on your own, or was it you have a huge family? Was it one of your siblings?
My 2 older brothers were about 4 or 5 years older than me, so we'd share there was 7 kids in my family, so we shared the same room. And we had a stereo in there, and they were just playing, Sabbath, AC/DC, Nugent, and stuff like that, and I remember going to the store with them when the day Technical Ecstasy came out in 1976, and they picked up the 8-track. And I remember them putting it in I was sitting in the back seat. I was so excited. I was 12 at the time. So excited to hear it. They took the wrapper off. It was the first day it came out, and put the 8-track in and was listening to that. And then they took me, when I was 14 years old, Black Sabbath with Van Halen open in 1978 at the Garden.
Right.
That was my second concert ever.
No shit. What was #1?
That was the Never Say Die tour. The first concert I went to was the openings of Giant Stadium in Jersey with Ted Nugent, Aerosmith, Frank Marino, Mahogany Rush, and it might have been Journey or some other band. That was my first concert, like a few months before that.
You're obviously very discerning now as a music fan. As a kid, did you have those kinds of chops to be able to know, okay, Technical Ecstasy, not as good. Masters of Reality, whole different story?
No, I had no idea until later on when you go through the catalog and figure out which ones you like the best.
Right.
So, no, I had no idea at the time. I was just, whatever they were playing, whether I was driving around in the backseat of the car, because, when you were a teenager back then, it was always like you had to have an equalizer and a power booster in your car and the best speakers and just crank it as loud as possible and just drive around the neighborhood. So I was always in the back, just, absorbing that metal into my head. And I had no choice but to like metal. I found friends that liked it too, and I just really got drawn to it.
And you did want to go into being a musician at that time, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I know my friends were in bands, like high school friends and stuff. I just couldn't play an instrument. I was a lefty, so nobody could teach me guitar. I was like, I could teach a righty, and I couldn't do anything with my right hand. I went for singing lessons one time. I lasted one session, and the woman's like, listen, she goes, I'll be honest with you. You don't have an ear for music, and you probably never will. I could, you could waste your money. Maybe you can get a little better, but I just don't see it. But it's, if you want to keep coming back, and I appreciated her honesty because I knew I was terrible.
Right.
So I just never, I just didn't have any rhythm. So to forget the drum.
Gotten better? I mean, you must have, as with all the company you keep, you must have gotten a little bit better along the way.
No,
No, okay. I appreciate your honesty as well.
No, I still terrified. I'd be terrified. Like I've never sung karaoke in my life before. I'd be terrified.
I make horror movies, so that darkness of the band always appealed to me because it felt much more of a real darkness than a lot of the other metal I'd heard, which kind of seemed like it was playing at darkness. Or like if you want to use a Pink Floyd analogy, Roger Waters would sing about being insane, and Syd Barrett was so insane he couldn't even like pull his ideas together in a way that adequately explained insanity. So with these guys, you felt like they were singing from the inside out. That appealed to me. Another thing that appealed to me about this band, they kind of didn't really seem to give a shit if they lived or died while they were recording. And then I became friendly with Bill Ward maybe about 6-7 years ago. I wouldn't say good friends, but friendly. And that's kind of the background for me. Actually, before we go into the Sabbath stuff, I do want to say that although I've been a big fan of yours for a while, there is a crank call that you did for the Terrorizing Telemarketers compilation that I think, along with all the great stuff you've done on those comps, that one call is just, I've never heard anything quite like it in my life. It's called No, No, and I'm just going to play it right now.
Hello?
Hi, my name is. You have time for me to explain to you exactly what we can do for you?
Yeah.
Now, for you to qualify for our program, you must have a minimum of $5,000 in unsecured debt. Now, the most important part to qualify you, you must be struggling to make your payments or past due.
What was that part you just said?
You must be struggling or past due. Are you past due?
No, that was before that.
Struggling.
No, before that.
You must have a minimum of $5,000 and above in unsecured debt with each.
No, not that.
What is it?
No, there was something else I missed in there.
To qualify you for our program, you must you must have a minimum of $5,000.
No, it wasn't that.
Well, what is it, sir?
I don't know. If I knew what it was, I wouldn't be asking you.
We are a non-profit debt settlement company.
No.
I'm reading from a strip, and I know exactly what I just stated.
The part right before the debt relief, you said. What was that?
We are the debt relief.
It was right before that.
We are the exclusive agent for national.
No.
You're throwing me for loops right here, and that's all that I have stated.
Must have been right after the debt relief thing.
A non-profit debt settlement.
No.
Let me finish, sir. A non-profit debt settlement company.
No, it's not that. It's not that.
Information.
It's not that. This is frustrating.
Would you please let me explain that maybe you won't be so confused or getting so frustrated?
Okay, but you said that one 3 times. I told you that wasn't it.
Okay, then let me go on to proceed further then.
Okay.
Now, because we are a non-profit company.
No.
I'm trying to explain, sir, to you the program, and you're acting as if you don't want to correspond and listen. You keep hollering, no.
Because I know, as soon as you start talking, I know that's not it.
I don't know what you want.
I just want to get at the information, but I missed a part.
Maybe someone else can help you.
It was right before the debt relief.
We are a debt relief company. Okay.
No.
Wait a minute. You keep hollering no. And I'm getting frustrated, and I need to stay professional with you.
Well, that's not it.
Okay. You keep telling me it's right before the debt relief. I know what my strips say.
Yeah, and what is...
Listen. A non-profit.
No, it's
that's
not.
Before that.
No.
That's it.
Okay, what's right after?
Nothing else. Right after that, that's the information regarding debt relief.
No.
You keep hollering no. That's very frustrating, and I can't help you. I haven't even went through the strip with you yet.
Well, it's frustrating when you keep repeating the same thing when I tell you it's not it.
We keep going over the same thing over and over, and my day is going to continue to go a good day.
You know, and it would be a better day if you could just give me the information that I missed.
Will you listen?
Okay.
Now, because we are a non-profit debt...
No, it's not that.
Will you stop saying no? You're not listening. Let me go on through the strip. Now, because we are a non-profit company, we are able to guarantee.
It's not that. No, it's not that part though. I heard that.
I'm moving on from that because there's nothing else there. Maybe you'll get some understanding in the next part, and you don't want me to keep going back over them, and I'm not going to keep repeating myself over and over.
I need to know that important piece of information, and you're not giving it to me.
The only important piece of information is that we are a non-profit company, and we represent.
I got that. No.
Well, bye, sir, because you still hard to know, and I can't. I'm not taking this from you today.
Shut up.
What makes that so genius to me, the push-pull, it's almost like you couldn't have casted somebody who was a better recipient of the call. And what you're adding to keep her hooked in and to push her the fuck away is so spot on. It was like really the stars aligned for that call. And that is one of the greatest works of art in any art form, that I've ever stumbled across, and I play it for everybody.
No, I appreciate it. And I was saying before, like I was just one take. I didn't have any idea. I just say, my buddy Don Jameson was next, and we had some idea to do a call together. And when I picked it up, I was going to say, hold on, let me get my brother on because he, whatever the idea was. And then I just said, wait, what was that part you said? And then she's like, but I go, no, before that. And then I just went with the call, and Don was looking at me like, hey, you going to join me in? I'm like, no, I think I may be onto something here. And it just happened just like that. There was I didn't go, hey, I'm going to tell this woman I didn't hear it. Go back to this part, maybe go back to this part. Can you this? I just winged it, and it was just gold. And it always was better when you get an African-American woman. Right. Because they get angry. They don't take a lot of crap. So whenever I know it is, I'm like, good, they're going to get riled up right away. And I've always noticed that. I'm like, right. So when I got her, I knew she was going to get, pissed right away. I'm like, perfect. Because you want that tension in the call.
Yeah, the amount, like the exact amount of tension in there was so spot on. Like I said, you couldn't have cast somebody any better. What's your favorite call that you've done?
I don't, that one's definitely up there. I mean, there's one, a track called The Record. It's like 9 minutes long, where I got messed with this guy trying to get me to sign up for a subscription for a newspaper.
I love Horny Priest is one of my favorites.
That was that was good. We actually got a new one coming out, Volume 7, in about another month. We're up to number 7. Me and Don Jackson just finished it, so it's some really good work. But yeah, Horny Priest was a good one. The bitch call, when I was calling the guy bitch, is
awesome. Yeah, because he really kind of attacks you back.
Which is great, because I love, like I said, once again, and just that that was the thing. I go, I'm going to call someone a bitch if it's a guy, and then he goes, no, my name is Rich. So it was just how ironic.
Perfect. Yeah, it's perfect.
Like he almost thought I confused his name.
Right. And then he says to you, well, you got nothing better to do than to sit and watch porn all day, right? Isn't that?
Yeah. Well, then he goes, what are you just doing, sitting around waiting for the phone? We're like, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Hoping it's you. Yeah.
I'm sitting around waiting for the phone to ring.
So I got to ask you do all these different styles of comedy. I've never actually seen you live doing stand-up, but all the different iterations, the hosting, the writing, you do all kinds of different stuff. Is there a way of doing this that you feel the most natural?
The stand-up comedy is my favorite. It's always been. Okay. I love going up on stage and just creating and performing. You don't know. You're going up there without a net. You don't know how it's going to go. You're trying new jokes and just, performing live. And I could say whatever I want to say. I could do whatever I want. I could dress the way I want. Whatever. I'm basically my own boss.
Yeah.
So I like that. And just, pushing the button, see how far I can go, going over the line. Maybe I'll come back, whatever like that. So that's what I love doing the best.
Yeah, I'm a really, really big fan.
Thank you.
A lot of times here I'm reaching out and I'm, just trying to get the show going. This one was like burning a hole in my calendar. So the episode rules tonight, as established by Jim himself, no non-Ozzy and no non-Dio. That's another episode for another time. So now let's introduce the characters in today's episode. Ozzy Osbourne, lead vocals. Tony Iommi, guitar. Geezer Butler, bass. It's also his birthday today. And Bill Ward on drums. Okay, I don't want to talk about any of the other people who dove through the ranks. We'll get to Dio. But before we move forward here, we're going to do a little segment that I like to call the run-up. And what this does is gets us through to release number 1 in as quick a fashion as is possible. So 1968, this is sort of formation and early days of the band. So following the breakup of the previous band, Mythology, in 1968, Tony Iommi, who was on guitar, and Bill Ward on drums, they wanted to form a heavy blues rock band. This is in Birmingham, land of belching smokestacks, and even though I've never been there, when I imagine it, everything is gray. There's not even, colors don't even exist. The two of them enlist Geezer Butler on bass and Ozzy on vocals, who had played together in a band called Rare Breed, and Osbourne had placed an ad in the local music shop that said, "Ozzy Zig needs gig, has own PA." The new group was initially called, do you know what they were called, Jim?
Earth.
No, even before that.
There was a bunch of different names.
Some, like the least likely sounding piece of shit name of all time. The Polka Tulk Blues Band.
That's right. Yep, you're right.
Yeah, so the Polka Tulk Blues Band, the name was taken either from a brand of talcum powder or an Indian Pakistani clothing shop. The exact origin's a little bit lost in the fog of time. But that iteration of the band included slide guitarist Jimmy Phillips, who was a childhood friend of Osbourne's, and a guy on sax, believe it or not, named Alan Clark. So after shortening their name to Polka Tulk, the band again changed their name to Earth, which Osbourne hated. Rather than asking the two weird other dudes to leave the band, these guys, I'm guessing in a sort of call forward to the communication issues that they would have to face for the rest of time as a band, instead of asking the two other guys to leave the band, they instead broke up and then quietly reformed as a four-piece. So in December 68, Iommi very quickly left Earth and joined Jethro Tull. A very strange sort of, faint left. But although his stint with the band was very quick, Iommi can be seen with Tull on the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus TV show. He did not like the direction that Tull was moving, so he returned to Earth by the end of the month. So in 69, the band discovers that they're being mistaken for another English group named Earth, so they decided to change their name again. So a cinema across the street from the band's rehearsal space was showing the 1963 horror flick Black Sabbath, Boris Karloff, directed by Mario Bava. So they're watching people line up to see the movie, and Geezer noted that it was strange that people spend so much money to see scary movies. So right after that, Ozzy and Geezer wrote the lyrics for their title track of the band, which was inspired by a vision that Butler had of a black silhouetted figure standing at the foot of his bed. And that song was the blueprint of the rest of their lives. The ominous sound of the song and the really dark lyrics, they pushed the band in a way different direction. No longer were they trying to sound like Cream. Now they were kind of staking out their own very specific territory. Rob Halford from Judas Priest called that song probably the most evil song ever written. They changed their name to Black Sabbath to accommodate that song title in August 69, and made the decision to focus on writing similar material in an attempt to create the musical equivalent of horror films. Phase 1, forging the heaviest of metals down in Satan's smithery, 1969 to 1973. The band's first show as Black Sabbath took place on August 30th, 69 in Workington, England. They were signed to Philips in November 69 and released their first single, Evil Woman, which is a cover of a song by the band Crow in January 70, which is perfect. These guys were a 70s band. They weren't a 60s band. So Sabbath's first major exposure came when they appeared on John Peel's Top Gear radio show, performing Black Sabbath, NIB, Behind the Wall of Sleep, and Sleeping Village. Although Evil Woman didn't really chart, The band were afforded 2 days of studio time in November to record their debut, Here's Where I Shut the Fuck Up. And in 1970, Black Sabbath is recorded and released.
Masterpiece. Yeah, I don't, the record company made them put in some of the versions. I think the different versions of the first Sabbath record, Evil Woman's on there.
Yeah.
But some of them are not. Some of them, I have different versions of the album where it's not. But yeah, the record company decided they needed a cover song for like a hit single, and it definitely didn't. It was all right, the song, but you could tell it wasn't. It's like Sabbath, I know, didn't want to do it. They were reluctant to do it. I know they recorded the album in 48 hours.
Yeah.
They were done in 2 days, the whole album. The Warning song's kind of an old cover song too. I forget the name of the band. That whole like 14-minute or 12-minute jam, which is great.
Oh, yeah, at the very end of the thing.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love that.
That's pretty incredible. What's cool about this record is, they still have one foot in the 60s in that sort of blues rock thing. I think they kind of wring all that shit, all those influences out of their, kind of get it out of the way within the first, I think, by album number 3, I think there was no more blues rock really.
Yeah, but that was, I love that. I love that jam and just that,
Yeah, it's cool.
The album's so raw.
It really is.
And, they basically recorded it live and,
do you think, this is kind of widely regarded as the first heavy metal album, and the Black Sabbath has at least been referred to as the first doom metal song. Do you think that that's an accurate assessment, or do you think that's a little too facile to give that designation?
Probably. I don't, I know there was some other like Blue Cheer or something was around. Right. And there was a couple other bands that, were metal, and I can't remember the names. They would say like that was the first metal record, but the first big one, even, Deep Purple already had like 3 records out, and they were like a weird band until they hit their stride in the early 70s. So I would give it to this record, definitely be the first metal album of all time.
So yeah, you are right. It was 2 days given over to all of the work on the record, but the actual recording was one single 12-hour session on October 16th, 1969. Iommi said, this is a direct quote, "We just went in the studio and did it in a day. We played our live set and that was it. We actually thought a whole day was quite a long time. Then off we went the next day to play for 20 pounds in Switzerland." So aside from the bells, thunder, and rain that were added to the beginning of the opening track and the double track guitar solos on NIB and Sleeping Village, that was basically it. It was live. And that's pretty intense to know that not only are they, they're doing a decent job of it and everything's in time, but they're creating a whole new style of music. You look at the Beatles, who, had that very first album, had a very similar situation where they had 1 day to lay down their live set. The Beatles, produced a great record as well, but they weren't, they didn't, create a genre that day.
That's sort of like, a band that plays clubs and is doing 3 or 4 sets a night, for 2 years, and they're working on those songs and they're really honed, and they know, the people that were coming to see them they're obviously responding to them. So that's why a lot of bands' first albums are the best, because they can work those songs in the clubs and find out if it's not going over, if the crowd's really not responding, maybe we got to change something or just get rid of that song, put another one in. And that's why always the second album that the bands put out, they don't have that freedom to go back out there and work those songs live before they bring them in and record them. So they don't know if the response they're going to get. So that's what with this first Sabbath record, they basically just played their set that they were probably playing when they were doing 3-4 sets a night.
What makes Iommi's playing style so immediately identifiable is an accident that he had at a sheet metal factory when he was 17, where the tips of his middle fingers of his fretting hand were cut off. So he created, you probably know this, right? You probably have an exact replica of his false fingertips, right?
Yeah, he just put basically glued plastic fingertips and had to come up with his own sound.
Yeah, it was actually from a dish detergent bottle. He detuned the strings on his guitar to make it easier for him to bend them, which was really just a pragmatic decision. But what it did was create this massive, heavy sound that had never been heard before. What he explained, he was talking to Phil Alexander in Mojo in 2013. I'd play a load of chords and I'd have to play fifths because I couldn't play fourths because of my fingers. That helped me develop my style of playing, bending the strings and hitting the open string at the same time just to make the sound wilder. And in the same article, Geezer said, back then the bass player was supposed to do all these melodic runs, but I didn't know how to do that because I'd been a guitarist. So all I did was follow Tony's riff. That made the sound heavier. His bass work in especially those early records, it's almost like I'm listening to the Allman Brothers, because it's like, it almost feels like two guitars that are just stacked on top of each other.
No, if you go when you see Sabbath live, it's just, that classic lineup, it's like you really notice how like Geezer is the driving force behind that band, but you wouldn't think the bass player. You just watch him, you're like, man, it's insane. Yeah, and I love that he plays with no pick too, which is great.
Is that so? I didn't know that, actually. That is crazy. I love this record. So from the cover on down, so you look at that cover, that is one creepy fucking cover. It is perfect. And at that time, the reviews, I was kind of under the impression, just as a general thing, that commercially they were selling tons of records and the critics just hated them. But I figured that the cool critics had gotten them, but they didn't. Even Lester Bangs. Yeah,
but the thing with Lester Bangs and most of the, like Rolling Stone and stuff like that, they never liked heavy metal. They never gave heavy metal any shot. AC/DC wasn't on the cover of Rolling Stone until like 2004 when they went in that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Sabbath wasn't on until late. I don't even know if they ever did an actual cover. I know Ozzy was on maybe once in the 2000s or whatever, maybe a solo thing, but they never respected heavy metal. So I wouldn't expect a guy like Lester Bangs or those, like David Lee Roth said, the reason critics like Elvis Costello is because they look like him.
Right.
Great quote. So I almost gravitated towards the bands that didn't get good reviews.
Yeah, totally. I mean, but the thing about Lester Bangs, and which is one of the reasons why he's one of the only rock critics I ever quote on this show, because I don't really respect rock criticism as a thing, but Lester lived it. So he was pushing Alice Cooper. He was pushing the Stooges at the time. So I thought, in retrospect, that the Sabbath was par for the course for him. But he described it as just like Cream, but worse. And he dismissed the album as a shuck, despite the murky song titles and some inane lyrics that sound like vanilla fudge, which is surprising to me. Looking at this thing, certainly retrospectively, it's, Rolling Stone is tripping over their shoelaces to rank it very high in the best albums of all time list. I think in the most recent greatest albums of all time, it was listed as 355, and it's listed as number 44 in their list of the best debut albums of all time.
Yeah, they came around after Sabbath won in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the career that they had, and they see the legacy that Sabbath had. But if they would have ranked that album, and when they wrote that review, it would have been, 5 from the bottom of the all-time album. So I'd love to examine this.
Let's go through it and talk song by song. The coolest thing for me in looking at this is side 1. I'm going to refer to it as Demon, because that's all the really dark stuff. Side 2 is Creamin', because they're kind of trying to do a Cream thing. It still has that darkness, but with Evil Woman and Warning, their feet are definitely planted more in the 60s than side 1. That first song, I mean, you could have this whole episode could be just on that one song. The thing that strikes me the most before anything else is that they really and truly stand in thrall before Ozzy's vocals and the words that are coming out of his mouth. So it's almost no, it's kind of no surprise at all that there was so much scrutiny at the time on their lyrics, what they stood for in terms of being in stark opposition to flower power. There's a tremendous amount of space in the arrangements. You're just hearing these words.
I mean, it's a perfect song. That's, a song Black Sabbath to start that record off. And then, The Wizard and NIB. And then, Wicked World is it's tough, man, because I love Warning, but Wicked World might be my favorite song on the first record.
Really?
Yeah, I love that song.
I really like it. I mean, that's the B-side of Evil Woman. The version that I have, it's not on that record.
Yeah, some of the versions, it was Wicked World, and the other version, and then it was Evil Woman. So they didn't have both on the record.
So what, you have a favorite song on the first record?
I would say, I'd say Wicked World.
It is Wicked World? Okay.
Either Wicked World or Warning. Warning is so good, too. I just love that jam and the lyrics, and then... Yeah, it's just, I just remember just putting that album on and just laying down and just listening over and over again. So it's a close between those two. It's
very interesting to me that Warning is your favorite track.
I never like the hits. I always, whenever the bands have the hit, the Wizard's a great song, NIB is a great song, the song Black Sabbath. But I always, gravitate to the non-hits, the deeper tracks in any band that I like. But Warning and Wicked World, the Behind the Wall Sleep, that whole jam.
Yeah. So let's just go in order. Let's just talk about all.
Okay.
So The Wizard, first of all, spectacular fucking use of harmonica in a metal tune. I mean, conceptually, that doesn't make any sense at all. Yet somehow, I don't think I've ever heard a harmonica sounding any heavier.
Yeah, I mean that's Ozzy on the harmonica and stuff. It's a great song. I mean, it's always
pre The Wizard. I can't even think of another metal song that features harmonica in a way that's this effective.
That's one thing with Sabbath. They always took chances.
Yeah, and Bill's fucking insane fills. He is fire on this song. It really. So this is a sort of a fantasy thing. This is definitely lyrically inspired by Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. Behind the Wall of Sleep, definitely one of the best on the record. Sick guitar solo and crazy rhythm section work again. And also, like, my favorite moment on that has to be that melodic curly cue in the intro bass riff. I can feel that shit in my bowels when I hear it if it's loud enough.
I know when you crank that, like you're in your car or wherever, it's amazing.
It really is.
And the thing is, like, that album came out, 69, I think it was February 13th, 1970, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly.
But it doesn't sound dated at all.
No, not at all. It sounds outside of time.
Yeah, it really does. Like, you could put it on and it doesn't go, oh, well, yeah, it's kind of didn't really stand the test of time. It's kind of a little dated, but not at all. It still sounds fresh.
NIB. Okay, let's talk about the lyrical conceit being so fucking genius. This is a song written in the first person from the point of view of Lucifer. And Geezer has said that the song was about the devil falling in love and totally changing, becoming a good person. The Beatles were, doing All You Need Is Love. They're trying to do it from the point of view of Satan. I really love this song. Yeah.
And it's, there's different meanings to it. Supposedly, it's Nativity in Black they shortened it to NIB, but then also Dio took it as Nativity in Black, but when he joined the band, but then you hear these stories that they used to call Bill Ward's like crusty beard because he put in like a ponytail, a nib.
Right. I love all those things where it's like, is it incredibly dark or is it some cheesy, corny in-joke?
Right.
The other anagram that I've also heard is Name in Blood. Notwithstanding any of the actual interpretations, this is an amazing song. Not a single, but this could be my favorite on the record. There's stiff competition, but this is high up there for me. So
look, the song is classic. You can't go wrong by picking NIB and go, really? I'd be surprised that you would take that song. The songs. I mean, it's a classic, and it was in the Sabbath set for a long time, and whatever version of Sabbath was out there, Ozzy used to even do it solo sometimes too. So
I kind of feel like there isn't on the first 5 records, Up until I would say, through the end of '75, there wasn't a single bad song on any of the records.
You're right. There's not one. I'd even go even further till Never Say Die.
Oh, no shit. Okay,
Yeah.
so Technical Ecstasy is going to be an interesting discussion. I'm guessing here that maybe the time at which you discovered it may be coloring your recollections, although it's impossible to say. But that's kind of the first one where things go a little bit wonky. But
It's possible because usually the first record you hear from a band is your favorite. You remember that moment in time. But to me, that's not my favorite at all. But that's just the first. I probably heard Sabbath before Technical Ecstasy, but I just remember going to the store that day when it came out in '76 to go get it. But I'm sure I knew the other stuff. That's a little foggy, but I'm sure I knew the other Sabbath stuff before that.
I'm incredibly excited to court dissent with you on that topic. Definitely. When we go to side B on the debut, it's definitely a shift of vibe, but you kind of have to be maybe a little bit more familiar with them to really pick up how it's different. But Evil Woman, a sort of downshifted cover tune, it was covered by these guys in their live act, right?
I don't even know if they did it live. They might have, but I don't think so. I think the record company, because they were really obscure band. It was Crow maybe or something.
Yeah. They were called Crow.
Yeah, and so I don't even think they were aware of this song. I think the record company, if I'm not mistaken, said, "Listen, do this song. This will be a hit for you guys." Which, by the way, going back to I never noticed that. I never really realized that side one and side two were so different. Like side one is evil and side two is more of like a jam.
I never really picked it up together this time. This is the first time I heard it where I was like, yeah, there's kind of, they're hedging their bets a little bit. Like the side one is like, we're going to forge a whole new style of music. Side two is like, all right, let's just slow things down. So just in case we're, completely on our own here and, thinking wildly off the beam, you can sort of get your bearings. That's what it felt like to me this time around.
That's a good point. All these years, I never realized that. And I'm thinking about it. Yeah, absolutely. It is two different sides of music. It really
does. It does feel very different. And then Sleeping Village, is the beginning of that sort of like, black light, lava lamp, sort of, I really love, these pieces that they put on their records that are these sort of, these sort of ambient breakdowns that texture it. They're really actually good. They're not like filler or like placeholder. They're actually like these tracks. Like Sleeping Village is going to go on the playlist.
That was the one thing with Sabbath. A lot of their songs, they wrote like two great songs in one song. Like they could have split those songs up when they change and go in a different direction in the song. I'm like, that could be a whole other song.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And sometimes they do that. Sometimes they, there's some really confusingly titled stuff.
I know. They're all over the place with, the straightener and all this stuff. And
exactly.
Yeah, just these weird titles. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I try to avoid most of that stuff because I'm like, there's just too much of it going on. It's confusing.
Yeah, I think, like even if you're like a seriously compulsive collector, it's still very, very confusing. But, this is their first example of acoustic ambience. And it feels actually very much like Ennio Morricone and his work for Sergio Leone for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and, those spaghetti westerns from the 60s. There's even a boinging mouth harp. And then your favorite, which is over 10 minutes. I believe it's their longest song on record, with Megalomania coming second. I feel it's a little bit bloated, and it is a sort of wandering prog-like thing that never really 100% lands. But for me, it's part of the charm. Whereas you have a totally different take on it. Tell me why a sort of like very atypical prog-like Black Sabbath tune has hit you harder than the rest of the tracks on the record.
I don't know, because I'm not into prog at all. I don't like prog music, but for some reason, I was always attracted to this song, or just this jam. that just went on, and then Ozzy coming in with his lyrics, and then there's no lyrics for like 5 straight minutes, and he comes back in. I don't know, for me, for some reason, just Iommi just jamming and just rip it on that guitar was just, I don't know, for some reason, I just always loved how this record ended with this song.
And you know what's funny about these guys? Here's their first album. You know, they need an audience, and the 2 songs that they cover are by bands that otherwise I never would have. I don't know who the fuck they are. Crow, no clue. And Warning is by the Ainsley Dunbar Retaliation. They certainly could have covered songs that were more recognizable, but you got to hand it to them for going obscure.
I also think, like, in their live set, they were playing like these long, like a song like Warning would kill time because they were doing 2 or 3 sets a night. Right. So it gives the other guys gives Ozzy a break to go off the stage for a little bit, let Iommi shine and all that stuff. So I think that might have been one of the reasons too. I'm always really blown away by a band that arrives fully formed. And it's funny, as rudimentary as the record is, as what you see is what you get, as this is, it feels like the arrival of a fully formed adult being. Like they barely even got better than this. They just continued being as good. I mean, like that riff and the melodic bass parts in Behind the Wall of Sleep, the proto blues metal of The Wizard, it's all there already. They simply remained this good. One of the best debut albums of all time, 4 3/4 stars out of 5. That's what you give it? That's what I give it. I give it 5. I know you do. And I want to, part of me wants. No, I got it. 1970, same fucking year, which is crazy to think about. Paranoid. Paranoid was released in September 1970, 6 months later, which is completely ridiculous. A bunch of the band's signature songs are on this, including Iron Man, War Pigs, and Paranoid itself, which was the band's only top 20 hit. This is the last time I'm mentioning Rolling Stone, but it ranked number 1 on the greatest heavy metal albums of all time for them. When most people think of Black Sabbath, this is the record they think about. This is sort of as close to a greatest hits record as any of their regular studio albums became. Yeah, and I never liked the albums with all the hits on it, even though, this is a masterpiece, but to me, and this is probably controversial, I never liked the song Paranoid. Yeah, I get that. It's sort of like the most direct distillation of what they do. It's just like, I don't know how that became such a big hit, and Ozzy had to do it at the last song of every solo show for the rest of his career. And then when Sabbath got together, they had to do it the last song. It's like, to me, it's just a throwaway song. It's not even, I don't even like it that much. Like I never just, radios, that was the only one that originally they would play, but I don't like the song at all. Huh. I don't hate it, but I like it's if there's 9 songs on the record, I think that's the worst one. Yeah. I mean, would you say that it's fair to say that this is, when people talk Black Sabbath, they're typically referring to this record? Yeah, definitely. Like people who don't know the band, let's say, they're generally talking about the work on this record. And, the record was supposed to be called War Pigs, and that's why the album cover is the guy with the sword on it, the shield or whatever. But because of the war, the record label's like, no, you can't call it War Pigs. So they changed at the last second, but they didn't get a chance to change the album cover. So they made Paranoid instead. Yeah. I love that little factoid because if you don't know that story, it really is very confusing. So let's talk about the recording of it. Again, and, I want to mention their producer, Roger Bain. So these guys come back to the studio with Roger in June 1970, 4 months after their first album is released. And just like you say, Jim, to these guys, you probably know this, but, the Paranoid was written as an afterthought. Bill Ward, he said, we didn't have enough songs for the album, and Tony Iommi just played the guitar lick, and that was it. It took 25 minutes from top to bottom. Yeah. Some of the best songs are written that way. Yeah. So, absolutely. Yeah, they needed one more song to fill a record. And then most of the songs on the record, actually, even though they're, generally tighter, they evolved during onstage improvisational jams. So that was basically the foundation of their songwriting style. So Geezer
in 2013 told Mojo that Paranoid was about depression because I didn't really know the difference between depression and paranoia. It's a drug thing. When you're smoking a joint, you get totally paranoid about people. You can't relate to people. There's that crossover between the paranoia you get when you're smoking dope and the depression afterwards. 2 years later, he was in another interview, he said, I used to be a cutter. I'd cut my arms, stick pins through my fingers, that kind of thing. I used to get really depressed, and it was the only thing that could bring me out of it. If Sabbath hadn't made it, I'd have been long dead. I'd have killed myself. So this, at the very least, notwithstanding its ability to stick in your craw, I guess it helped him, kind of explain, these sort of negative psychological traits that were driving him. A negative thing that came, if you're like a seriously intense heavy metal fan like you, is that, as Iommi said, that the Paranoid single attracted screaming kids. So that's when the sort of like the Black Sabbath version of Beatlemania started happening.
Yeah, because that was it was a bit single, and I think they did it on one of those British shows, Top of the Pops, or one of those, and people went crazy over it. So I mean, look, you never know. You know, when they wrote it, they didn't go, "Oh man, this is going to be kind of like a teeny bopper song." The kids, like, a bunch of screaming kids up and down. They never thought that. You just don't know until you release it.
Looking back over the entirety of metal history, and you admittedly know more about it than I do, this record is the Rosetta Stone. I can't think of any record that kind of has all the signifiers, all the nuts and bolts, the sort of blueprint of what this art form would wind up being than this record.
I get. Well, like I said, it's got the hits. I like Iron Man. I love the breakdown towards the end. I was never a huge fan of Iron Man, but Fairies Wear Boots, War Pigs are masterpieces. And even though they're really popular songs, I got no problem with them. War Pigs live is just phenomenal. But I'll tell you, my favorite song off this record is Hand of Doom.
That's a great one.
It's unbelievable. I mean, then I love Rat Salad, just, the instrumental. Planet Caravan, which, Pantera covered years later, is a pretty cool, weird, trippy song.
I love that.
But, Fairies Wear Boots is phenomenal. But, so, I mean, there's a lot of hits. It reminds me of like the Nirvana Nevermind record. There's so many hits on it.
Right.
There's like 9 songs. You got like 6 of them that everyone knows that are staples in their set all the time.
Yeah. And we just I did Nirvana a few months ago, and it's interesting that you bring up that one specifically, because that album is such a part of the canon that, sure, I had it when it came out in 91 and all that, but I never went back to it. I don't think I'd heard it for a couple of decades even, just because it was so overdone. But when you crack that shit open after a while, if it's just been sitting there, a lot of times you can reconnect with the meaning of it. That culture is all but eradicated since then.
No, it's true. I mean, I put Nirvana, I got a son, so I was starting to get him into, some metal and stuff. And he was starting to take some music lessons. And we started playing the Paranoid record, which I never listened to in a long time, especially the hits like Iron Man, and Fairies Wear Boots and War Pigs. I rediscovered that album again. And the same thing with Nevermind. He was a Nirvana fan, so I went back and listened to that because I needed to put it away because radio just completely ruined that record.
Yeah, it did. Well, let me ask you, how does you said your son's 10?
He'll be 12.
Oh, 12. Okay.
Week, yeah.
How does Jim Florentine's teenager rebel against him? Does he behave really well? Does he listen to classical music? How does Jim Florentine's son rebel?
No, he likes the same sports teams as me. He likes the same music.
Okay, good.
Yeah, he likes some rap stuff now and hip hop because his friends like it and they played in every TikTok video. So he knows some of those songs, which is fine. I don't get mad, but he knows the history of metal. He saw the Sabbath reunion tour. At one point, probably like 4 or 5 years ago, his favorite Sabbath song was "Am I Going Insane?"
That's cool.
Yeah. And when he met Ozzy, we met him backstage. He said, "Are you going to play Am I Going Insane tonight?" And he's like, "Huh?" Like he didn't even remember the song.
So do you have, or do you have relationships with all the guys in the band, or just?
I do a show on Ozzy's Boneyard on Sirius XM. So, Ozzy and Sharon own the channel. So I got hired by them, and, I've hung with Ozzy a few times. He never did that metal show, but I know Sharon really well. And Jim Norton, another comedian, is really close with Ozzy, and me and Jim are best friends. So
yeah,
I've hung with him before, and Tony and Geezer and Bill all did that metal show. So I know them a little bit.
But more Ozzy. You have more of yeah. All right, so let's go through this record and kind of try to get away from this being the hits record and really just talk about musically the terrain they were trying to stake at that point, because we talked about the sophomore slump thing being a very real thing, and these guys, regardless of whether you like or don't like hits, they certainly dodged any notion of this being like what are they going to do now? I mean, they were, all guns blazing at this point. No,
it's true. And one thing about Sabbath, and I always say it, is every record sounded different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you couldn't put, Children in the Grave on volume 4.
Yeah.
So it's just weird. Like, and I love that about bands. A lot of bands try to do that and they can't pull it off, but Sabbath always pulled it off. I mean, maybe the later years, not so much.
In my head, I group them in pairs. I feel like album 1 and 2 have a similarity, then 3 and 4 do, then 5 and 6 do.
Okay.
In my head, I always saw it that way. So War Pigs, definitely ubiquitous. As far as, from where I'm sitting, it doesn't diminish the behemoth-like power of the tune. It's a perfect sprawling classic. All the best parts of side 1 and side 2 of the debut, all the, the Cream type stuff, all the forward-looking metal stuff.
There's nothing wrong with this song. There's nothing you can pick apart. It's not too long. It's a perfect song.
Yeah, it really is. And the very first memory that Bill Ward had of performing it was at a place called the Beat Club in Switzerland in '68. The band was forced to play multiple sets every night, just like every other band at that time. And they didn't really have much material. So they'd perform really long jam sessions to fill in the sets. And Iommi said that War Pigs came from one of those jam sessions.
Oh, really? So they had a lot of songs written. That's similar to like Van Halen. They had so many riffs, written in these songs and pieces of songs that they could go back and piece them together. Even that last record they put out in 2012. So when Sabbath was doing those 3-4 sets a night, they were coming up with this material, just pieces of it, which is great.
I love those tunes on that final record from the early days. Have you heard the early Van Halen demos when they hadn't yet completely isolated their sound yet?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not talking about the Gene Simmons thing. I'm talking about...
No, I've heard them on the internet, on YouTube and stuff.
It's really cool. Like, I like that they hadn't yet decided which strands musically they were going to focus on. So they have like almost Fleetwood Mac style pop in there as well. And, it's almost like that was less exciting once they said, we're just going to do this one thing.
Right. No, you're right.
All right. So Paranoid, the shitty song Paranoid. So it's kind of short and punchy, but lethal, like being stabbed very quickly with a switchblade, an experience that, thank God, I have not yet had. This is the first single from the record, B-side, The Wizard. And I can understand why you wouldn't connect with this, but this is probably, if somebody has never heard Sabbath before, this is a pretty decent place to start.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess, but it's just, most of Sabbath's, songs don't sound like Paranoid.
That's true.
They're not quick 2-minute and 32-minute songs either.
Right.
They didn't write to write hit singles. So I always thought, I'm like, man, if they would have just picked some other Sabbath song to be like the song that they were playing on the radio to be their most popular song for the masses, like, why did they pick Paranoid? They could have picked a lot of other songs, I thought.
So if some douchebag crosses paths with you and asks you, never heard Black Sabbath before, what would you start him off with?
A song or album?
Actually, both. But I was really asking about a song, but either.
That's tough. And maybe like a Fairies Wear Boots.
And so this would be the record that you would initially start them off with?
I think so. Yeah, I think you got to go with the greatest hits record and then go from somewhere else. It might be too weird for them to start off with a volume 4.
Right.
So something like that, or the later Never Say Die Technical Ecstasy record. So I think of Paranoid. I always do that with Metallica. When I get someone in the Metallica that doesn't know them, I go to Master of Puppets first, and then I'll tell you which album to go to next. Because Kill 'Em All's too, it's too raw, and it's, and Ride the Lightning is great. But I say go to Master of Puppets, and you become a fan. Then I'll tell you the next record to go to.
So jumping way forward here, I'm curious what you think about the Rick Rubin touch for these heavy metal acts, since we're going to be dealing with that with Sabbath. How do you think he fared with Metallica?
I love it. I love Rick Rubin. Yeah. I love most of the stuff he's done is amazing. Some of the best records. Most of the stuff that he's done, the metal stuff, has been great.
Yeah, it's really just those two, right? Is there other metal stuff that he did in terms of revitalizing old bands' careers?
Well, not old bands' careers, but he did the Slipknot Volume 3 record, which is, to me, their best record. And, he did, this is not actually metal, but he did these couple of Andrew Dice Clay records, A Day to Laugh That Died, where he bombs. And it's so funny. People are walking out of a room. He's playing in front of 10 people. And that was Rick Rubin's idea. And it's just a masterpiece.
No shit. So is he doing a Bob Zamota thing where it's intentionally bombing, or?
He just goes up on stage with no material and just riffing, and just people are walking out. This is in the heyday of his career when he was selling out Madison Square Garden. Wow. And he already put out his album. He had the HBO special. It went double platinum. And Rick Rubin's like, hey, let's do an album where you you go into a comedy club, Dangerfields, unannounced, in front of 15 people on a Monday night at 10 o'clock, and just go up there and riff with no material. I don't want you to do any material. Just kind of come off the top of your head and just mess around.
And he fucking bombed?
He bombs, and they put it out, and it's genius.
That's amazing. I love that. There's a record called Having Fun with Elvis on Stage. You ever hear of that?
No.
So I think it was, I don't know the exact year. I believe it had to have been mid to late 70s, because he was out of his fucking mind. But it's just between song patter that is totally drug-addled. There's no music on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and
that sounds interesting.
Yeah. You're kind of from all the descriptions that Meredith has talked to me about, your representative, you're basically an Amish man. You don't really like the modern technology that much. You don't like all that stuff, do you?
No, because I don't, and I'm not a tech guy, so I don't like. It drives me nuts. If I can't figure it out, I don't want to be the tech guy. Right. So I can't. There's just too much every week that you got to change something. It's some new thing you got to do now, and this one, and there's new service, and you've got to download this thing, and it drives me nuts.
Yeah, it's a pain in the fucking ass.
It is, and it's constantly changing. I mean, it's life was a lot simpler back in the day.
It was, even just a few years ago.
Yeah.
Now I got a fucking hashtag and at everything. And
yeah, it's it's too much. I can't spend my whole day. And it doesn't mean anything. They see it 10 minutes later, they're on to something else. They don't care.
Yeah, we're fucked. We're all fucked.
Yeah.
It's good. We're completely doomed. All right. So Planet Caravan. A little ambient breather before we're clobbered over the fucking head with the next mighty anvil on the record. Say what you want about these guys not being hippies, but this track proves they weren't afraid to bust out the bongos and the flute. This is a great tune. I love this, man. I really do.
It's so trippy, and it's
it is.
You could tell that this is a song where people put the headphones on, maybe they smoke a little weed and listen to this. And I just love how Sabbath would put songs like this on every record and just, completely slow it down. I remember Metallica tried doing that, I think on the Load record, if I'm not mistaken. Why would they put a slow song on all of a sudden after 5 heavy songs? And they're like, well, Sabbath would do that all the time.
Yeah. And the real, what it comes down to here is that if you're going to slow things down, then the next song that is gonna punch you in the face is gonna hit that much harder.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, if you don't know the first thing about texturing your work, then it's really just going to sit there like you're farting in someone's face, basically. So Iron Man, the story of the actual title is that Ozzy, when he heard the guitar riff at rehearsal for the first time, said that it sounded like a big iron bloke walking about. And my favorite thing about the whole story is that Iron Bloke became the title for a short time. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. I never heard that. Iron Bloke was originally
Iron Bloke, which is the least metal sounding title ever.
Yeah.
Iron Bloke. You gotta fucking love that. It's been played 1 billion times. It'll never get old for me. There's something about this song. It's an absolutely tireless thing for me. Are you over this one, or can you still find new things hearing this?
No, I'm over this one, but it's not nearly as overplayed as Paranoid. I mean, it's so heavy, the song, the riff is, so heavy. And when I went back and listened to it about 4 years ago, when I started getting my kid into Sabbath, I appreciated this song even more.
Yeah.
And I love the ending. I love the breakdown and the ending. It gets so heavy and stuff like that. So, I can't say anything, it is a little overplayed, and they did it every concert too. Ozzy would always do it every concert. I was like, all right, I could do it out there. You could probably switch out some other song, but he rarely did. So maybe that's why I have a little sour taste, but the song's a classic.
Yeah, it really is. The VH1 called it the greatest heavy metal song of all time. Not that they know, besides your show, a hell of a lot about metal, but to say that it is certainly not a controversial opinion. The next song I never really like all that much. Electric Funeral is kind of less redolent to Pure Evil and more like EC Comics, which is not bad by any means, but not as much of the real deal as the rest of it.
To me, this is my second favorite song on the record.
No shit. Okay.
I love it. It's so heavy.
I was hoping for this. Tell me, what did I miss here?
I just love the heaviness of it. It's just,
yeah.
I've always, for some reason, I was always attracted to this song. Like, I don't know, just because it was, it's the heaviest song on the record.
It feels like Hand of Doom is to me, but
well, I'm talking like overall, like the Hand of Doom slows down, then it gets heavy, then it's at the end and stuff. But I don't know. I mean, Hand of Doom is a whole other story. Like that's my favorite song on this record. But I put Electric Funeral too.
Huh. Yeah, it didn't hit me as hard. I would say that it's my least favorite song on the record. But Hand of Doom, that one, it's not the first one that I think of when I think of this record. But it really punched me in the fucking nuts this time around. Really sludge. It just drags like the monkey's knuckles on the midsection is what really hit me this time around. It really pulls together tight and takes off. And the guitar solo almost feels like a raga, like an Indian raga.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was happy, Sabbath, when they did the reunion tour, the last reunion tour, they brought this song back and was playing it live, which this was always a forgotten song. Like the Sabbath with Dio and whoever else was playing with Iommi never did it. Ozzy never did it solo. And then they decided to bring this back, which was like just that alone, seeing that in the set list was like, I'm going to see him an extra time just to hear that.
Did you know that they were going to play it?
Well, you see the set list once it's out there. Everybody's talking about like what's on the list and all that stuff, right. And they brought back Hand of Doom. Yeah,
I'm glad that they exhumed some of a lot of the stuff that that you were kind of tired of. It seems like they were tired of the same things, and so added some really exciting shit before they called it a day. Rat Salad, which you'd mentioned before, I would say points for the great title alone. And Bill Ward's Ginger Baker Moment in the Sun drum solo. I'm not a huge fan of drum solos. I'm still kind of shaking off the debut's B-side British blues cream moves. I do like the song, but I'm not a drum solo guy.
I'm not either, and I don't like them when they're in concert because it's just like, here we go. Everyone's going to take a break. Drummer's got to show off, which I get it. He's back there. He wants a little attention, but this song is just heavy too, and I like that there's no lyrics, that Ozzy doesn't sing in the song. I love this song.
I think, Fairies Wear Boots is, aside from Hand of Doom, is my favorite song on the side. And that track really fucking swings. Again, Bill Ward's playing a really big hand in that.
It's unbelievable, Fairies Wear Boots. Like, that's a song that Ozzy should have been playing solo, and then the Sabbath Fairies Wear Boots I thought more than like Iron Man. To me, that's a better song, Fairies Wear Boots, than Iron Man.
Right. And
everybody knows Fairies Wear Boots. Like, every Sabbath or Ozzy fan would know Fairies Wear Boots.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's got one of those, confusing intro titles, Jack the Stripper /
Jack the Stripper. Yeah. War Pigs is Luke's Wall.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I didn't even write that one down because it was just making me sick.
Yeah, I know. It's I don't know what they're talking about with that.
So Fairies Wear Boots, lyrically, apparently, the first part of the song is about the skinheads who cornered Ozzy and called him a fairy because of his long hair. But also, Geezer has talked about how Ozzy's lyrics went off on random tangents, and that the second half of the song was about LSD.
Yeah. Some of the lyrics was some drug-induced dream that Geezer had too.
Yeah, a lot of Geezer's dreams are the tunes.
Yeah.
This is unquestionably the most overexposed Sabbath LP, and also the one that most people are referring to when they refer to them, and it's stuffed to the gills with an embarrassment of classics. It's unquestionably front-loaded, in my opinion. I know you don't think so, but the flip is strong enough to hold its own. Again, I give this one 4 3/4 stars.
This album, Paranoid, reminds me of the Deep Purple Machine Head album with all the hits on it.
Yeah.
And I like listening to the other Deep Purple records. This has got to be 5 stars too.
Talk to me about the Deep Purple records that really pump your nads.
Well, I'm just saying, like, everybody always goes to Machine Head.
No, I get it. So which is the one that you go to?
Live in Japan.
I got to go In Rock.
In Rock's great too. I like Fireball, but I love the Live in Japan record.
Live in Japan's awesome. That front to back, it makes no sense to me why In Rock is not considered to be a classic on the same exact level as Machine Head.
No, it's true. I know.
So good,
It
man.
probably just got lost in the mix when it came out.
And they fell hard to me anyway. I mean, Come Taste the Band is embarrassing. And that was really early into their career. They had like 3 or 4 great years.
Yeah. I didn't like the 60s stuff before Ian Gillan got in. I didn't like it at all.
Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to stay tuned because this Tuesday on Discograffiti's The Private Press with Paul Major, we are full-heartedly tackling D.R. Hooker's private press release, The Truth. And this Thursday's Wildcard episode features another classic episode of Queasy Listening, wherein we tackle Guns N' Roses' Chinese Democracy. And then next Sunday, of course, we're going to plow on, Jim and I, into Master of Reality and Volume 4. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to our graphic designer, Todd Zimmer, and my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Discograffiti.